I grew up in Houston, Texas. The three values in Texas are like beer, football, and Jesus. Probably in that order. So like going to Austria, where values are like family and being outdoors was like, oh, even like the cultures of like our own countries. And if you haven't been exposed to something else, you don't know any different in meditation or just we're in a point of reflection. The idea is to ask ourselves, like, what in me is dying away? What in me is being born? And then the third piece is, like, what has always been the same? In a world where it's like, rush, 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 how much actual tangible time are we spending reflecting, thinking about our values? If we're being asked to do something, like even this podcast, like, again, I want to talk to you about values. Does that align with my values?
Very good. All right, Anna. So glad to have you on the show. Never did I ever think that this would happen for us. So thank you for being part of my life, being my friend for all these years since really freshman year of college, and for being part of Becoming You and being on this podcast today. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like I always give this big like intro and then the other person's like, cool. So now I'm like, oh yeah, back to me.
I mean, I can spill some secrets of college if you want first.
Oh, but hell yeah. No, it's okay. we can table those for now. But yeah, I mean, you and I like have always had just the deepest kind of connection when it comes to conversations. It's something I've really respected about you and appreciated in our friendship, how you really meet me kind of where I'm at with my deep thinking, my stream of consciousness, my questions. Even now it's a great example. I'm rambling on and you're attentively listening, which I, love and adore about you. And we recently, I mean, we don't have to go into our history. So anyway, so I know today we wanted to talk about values and our belief systems and kind of how we prioritize those in our lives, maybe even how we created it absentmindedly from childhood on. And now as adults with autonomy and a better understanding of the world, we're kind of taking inventory and taking stock of what's important to us and what were we just told was important. And those things could still be true, but are we reflecting on our own growth and personal development to really ascertain, hey, does this still matter to me? And am I going to enforce this in my life? Or is it something I can now let go of and be grateful that it was there and it served its purpose, but it's no longer something I need to, continue to fight for? So what does that mean to you? What comes to mind when I say all of that?
I think what comes to my mind first really is, like, I feel like to be a real adult and a functioning adult from like the core of yourself, you have to do some kind of, I know the term nowadays is like deconstruction work. And right. I've heard that term a lot, specifically about religion. However, I think that really applies to so many topics, whether that's like values you've held since childhood or values that your family unit has, like your family of origin, your birth family. I don't know, it comes to a point like developmentally, like where you really have to ask yourself, like, to really become you, like what we're talking about, like this becoming yourself. Like, I'm not my mother. I know my mom's values, but like doing this work of deconstructing what those are. I just find myself like really in that space. Hello, from my cat Patches.
I love him. Glad to see he's doing well.
He's definitely well. He's alive and kicking and probably will be very persistent. So he's actually body crawling underneath the camera.
Oh my goodness.
But
and for anyone that's on audio only, Patches is Anna's kitty cat. So he's making a presence on camera.
Yes, he is definitely a presence. But yeah, that idea of deconstruction, I feel like, is like a life. It's a work that we have to do.
Right. And yeah, when I first became familiar with deconstructing or unlearning, reframing, any of these words that folks use to kind of disassemble these core beliefs that may actually be limiting beliefs that have just been so ingrained and so enmeshed and gone unchecked for so long that you don't even know that they're there, lingering in the background, infiltrating your subconscious and really dictating a lot of your behavior as a result, because you're not being conscious to them and you're not being intentional or present with them in the moment. When I first came to these, again, like these phrases, it was only in recent years, I would have to say in the last 4 to 5 years. And ultimately, over 10 years ago is when I really started pulling away. I guess for me personally, it was away from the church, and the church taught me so much about black and white thinking without calling it black and white thinking. And so when I started seeing a mindfulness coach and talking with her about these different things, it became really clear really quickly that there's this opportunity to live in the gray and think in the gray that I had never, it was a muscle I had never stretched. I had never used it, and I didn't even know how to. And even now, in my 30s, I still like am thinking every day, okay, how can I see another person's perspective and not jump to my own conclusions right off the bat? And that's just the simplest way to point to some gray area where things
Yeah.
aren't always black and white and they're not always crystal clear.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what has deconstruction meant for you? What has that looked like for you?
Well, it's interesting because when you were just sharing about like stepping away from the Catholic Church, stepping away from those particular values, like one of the things that came to my mind was like if you've been brought up like in a particular kind of population and your only
Mhm.
experience is that population, like you don't know what else is out there. Like
Right.
you don't know what the options are. You don't know you have
Exactly.
options. So I feel like it's not until, we hit certain milestones in our lives, like going to college or graduating college, entering the workforce, different things like that, where you're exposed to other people and their
Right.
values. I think it's like
Right.
when I've realized those, it's like, okay, my values and that person's values are really different. Like,
Right.
how can we come to understand one another, like genuinely like seek to understand one another and ourselves also,
Hmm.
um,
Right.
and then move into that whatever it is together. I don't know, that's
Right.
something that really strikes me, is like you don't, it's not until you know the other, or the
Right.
other options, that you can really identify those things.
Right. Right. That's so true. That's even a perspective I had never thought of too. Like here I am beating myself up for being so gung ho in one direction and never even taking the time to acknowledge, well, hey, maybe you weren't exposed to other paths in a way that was hospitable. Were you encouraged to explore other
Mhm.
areas, or were you
Yeah.
encouraged to stay on this one path with your blinders up and like don't ask any questions, And so that's a very good
Yeah.
point. When you do enter kind of a stage in life where maybe I use this word hospitable, but what I mean by that is like a nourishing environment where you can,
Mhm.
learn and grow in a safe space and challenge beliefs that you've held and ask questions of
Mhm.
other people without an air of defensiveness or combativeness or anything like that, or even just fear. I think a lot of the
Mhm.
conversations and the beliefs are couched in fear. Like I am too afraid to even ask myself or anyone around me, why do we believe the things we believe?
Yeah, and I think too, like some of that is also like one opportunity, like I think that we both had, was studying abroad, like
Hmm.
being, because that's part of it too, is it's like also like cultural belief structures. And then like
Right.
I think about like I grew up in Houston, Texas. Like the three
Yeah.
values in Texas are like beer, football, and Jesus. Probably
Right.
in that order, like so like
Yeah.
going to Austria, where values are like family and being outdoors and like different things. I
Right.
don't know, it just like it was like, oh, even like the cultures of like our own countries. And then I
Right.
mean, America, there's so many different cultures and subcultures within those, like, so we're looking at like our family unit, we're looking at the country, we're looking at like religion, like all of those
Right.
pieces, like, and if you haven't been exposed to something else, you don't know any different.
Yeah. That's so true. And I recently did this kind of do it yourself, peeling back the onions, or peeling back the
Mm,
layers of the onion exercise, just to get to the core of what do I believe? What do the people in my life believe? What did my nuclear family believe? And
mm,
now that I can see it all laid out in front of me, what actually is resonating with me and what can I let go of? And it kind of
yeah.
brought to light just this idea that there were certain values I thought, let's say it comes from your parents, like you think, maybe in your head you think, oh, I care about everything that my parents say because they're my parents and I respect them. But then when you write it on paper, you realize, wait, my dad believes these 10 things and I can probably pluck like four of them off that are meaningful to me and I can get rid of the other six and not feel any type of way. And then my mom
Yeah.
has 10 things. There's one that's super arbitrary, but for whatever reason strikes such a chord with me that I have a hard time letting go of that one. And then these other ones I so clearly disagree with that it's a no brainer to let go of them. So why is this one tripping me up so much? And I think just
Mm,
taking it, piece by piece. I mean, that's really what deconstruction is. If you were to think about building a house, there's a lot that goes into building the house. And if you were to
mm,
undo building the house, apart from just taking a wrecking ball to it, because there's still, salvageable like good foundation there. You don't want to destroy all of it, but then you'd have to
yeah.
start at the roof, like take the shingles off and then take the, assuming you could do this, but like take the, whatever they are, the 2x4s or whatever wood planks going to a roof. Clearly I don't construct houses, but you understand the metaphor.
I think
But yeah,
something
I
that you
mean, I
said
think,
too,
yeah.
I think something that you said too there that was interesting, like this idea of like, why do I do that? And I think that's something I'm working on is like how I ask myself that question. Like, am I inquiring in those into those beliefs with like fear or shame or
Mhm.
any of those other things, or am I meeting like the Anna that is been constructed through all these years? Am I meeting her and her beliefs that she's not even sure about with like curiosity and
Right.
kindness? Like, what is the
Mhm.
fundamental attitude at which I'm going through that? Because that also will impact the journey, and just like
Yeah.
how we talk to
Yeah.
ourselves and how we treat ourselves.
Right. That's so beautiful the way you said, am I meeting, the constructed Anna? Like, who am I today? And what does that look like? And, I mean, we do modifications to our homes, to ourselves,
Mhm.
to just our living situation. I mean, you rearrange furniture, it's the same type of thing. You don't always have the same likes and dislikes over time. And sometimes getting a refreshing change really helps with creative juices. It helps with mindset, maybe your mental health spikes, in a good way because you're finally feeling like comfortable in your own environment, because you're able to you're able to craft it in a way that aligns with who you are and how you see the world at this stage, and I know we go through many iterations and different phases of life, so just leaving some
Yes.
space for that for us to grow, hermit crabs, I don't know why this just popped in my mind, but hermit crabs, they live in a shell, but when they're too big for that shell, they need a bigger shell. And if you don't put a bigger shell in their cage, they will leave their old shell and they'll wind up dying because they don't have a new shell to go into. So it's just something to think about. Like, what are we doing to create an environment where we do have that next step to grow into? I think you sent something like this to me recently. Do you remember what it was?
I don't. But
Okay.
something came into my mind as you were talking about hermit crabs is there is a meditation, and I don't know if it's from like a traditional meditation. I don't know where I got this from. But the idea is to ask ourselves, like in meditation or just, we're in a point of reflection, like what in me is dying away? And that could
Mm,
be like a value that's your mom's or your dad's, or a relationship that doesn't align with your values. So, what in me is dying? What in me is being born? It's like, what is coming to life? Like, what is the new piece that's coming? And then the third piece is like, what has always been the same? like in that period. And like what comes to mind when I first did that meditation was like baby Anna, like what in like
Yeah.
baby Anna,
Yeah.
is like still so like purely her.
Hmm.
And to like celebrate those things, like to
Right.
like
Right.
genuinely celebrate.
Right. I love that meditation visual that goes with that, because it kind of categorizes past, present, and future in a way that is still existing within ourselves in this moment. We've learned things from the past that we're carrying with us. We have anticipation and excitement for the future that we're carrying inside of us. And we have only this moment. The two of us sitting here doing this chat. That's our life right now. The decisions in our lives that we've made have led to this moment, and here we are. And who knows what the future will hold after that. But there's nothing else going on in this moment apart from the two of us just sitting here and having this chat. And I think that meditating on that, recognizing what do we want to take with us into the future, being grateful for what we had in the past, but maybe if it's time to let go of it, that's okay. We don't need to take everything with us mentally, spiritually, physically. I mean, there's a lot of things we truly just can't take with us. So having a practice of detachment is really valuable in the long term for our minds and for our lives and the people in our lives too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another piece, like I know this is part of the deconstruction and part of that becoming you, and this has just been a lesson for me personally, is like to give myself the gift of time. Like you were sharing about like those values exercises, like about your mom and your dad and probably your siblings and the dog you had growing up. Like
My dog's
there's a
values are
piece
very
like,
important.
yeah, exactly, to him. Like but it's just so funny because it's like that takes time,
Hmm.
and like in a world where it's like rush, 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 like how much actual, like tangible time are we spending reflecting, thinking about our values? Like if we're being asked to do something, like even this podcast, like, like, and I want to talk to you about values. I'm like, does that align with my values? Like,
Right. No,
like
it's good.
100%, so here we are. But it just like that discerning piece doesn't
Mhm.
just happen.
Right.
And I think that giving ourselves that gift of time is such a crucial piece. Like undistracted time. Like there's there's actually an author that I like, Patrick Lencioni, and he talks about the term carefree timelessness and
Oh,
how
okay.
much fruit comes from carefree timelessness, like in a lot of
Mhm.
creativity and reflection and pieces like that. And I
Right.
feel like it's in those times that we permit ourselves to do those activities, like that's when the clarity comes, like
Right.
that's when something is born, or we realize something is dying away, or wow, this
Yeah.
thing has always been here.
Right. I love that. So born, dying away, and always been here. That's really powerful. Every year I have a 12-month whiteboard calendar that goes up on my wall. And, of course, it's to track milestones throughout the year, but I also use it to put down quotes and mantras. And that's like the perfect type of soundbite that just keeps me focused on my own personal North Star, whatever that looks like. And each year is a little bit different. But without intentionality and focus, it's hard for me to feel like we're not just washing away, like I think if you just, like you said, beer, football, and Jesus, like if those are, if if that was my life and I was just, going through those three like motions, and it could be any three or five or 10, it doesn't matter. But the point is, like, for me, I kind of thrive on change and I really enjoy continuing to push myself. I was chatting with a colleague of mine earlier today, and we were talking about the fact that, you kind of adjust to change a lot of times. And I'm like, yeah, I adjust to change, no problem. But I'll also tell you, if it's too sedentary, I'm going to create a little bit of chaos so I can grow through it, because again, like I see growth the most when I'm changing and when I'm doing things a little bit differently. So although I like having a routine, let's say going to the gym, it's going to change day to day because I want to go to different classes or do different movements or work, on different, really where the mind meets the body. Like if it's yoga or Pilates or
Yeah.
even Zumba, I mean, all of those things are kind of catching your brain on different wavelengths, and it keeps
Yeah.
you on your toes a bit. And that's just, an example regarding fitness, but it's really for anything. I mean, I move around a lot. I have a ton of different friends. And I love networking. I love meeting new people constantly because it just keeps it fresh. And to your point
Mm.
earlier, growing up in an environment where you did just stay in one bubble, it's almost being like being in an echo chamber. You know what they're going to say, they know what you're going to say, and you're both, just hitting each other with this confirmation bias over and over again. Great.
Yeah.
But once you step out of that, it's so addicting to just get more and more because you realize every person you meet can teach you something. Every
Mm.
opportunity you say yes to can expose you to a whole host of other opportunities that never would have happened if you didn't first say yes to that one and just be open to living your life. I mean, I look at it as I'm on this planet once, I'm here right now, and I would love to explore it as much as possible because we just happen to be on this planet right now during this time, the fourth dimension time and whatever intersecting at once. I mean, we just happen to be, I mean, it's really mind-blowing when you think about it. And I can just like keep unraveling that. But yeah, I think change is great. It's a good driver for growth.
I think something in what you said, Katrina, too, like, and I know I kind of mentioned this, like, attitude at which we're going about something, like, something I've struggled with in terms of identifying values, too, is like, okay, what is something, am I trying to fix myself? Or is it something that's really important to me?
Right.
And I think those are two totally different things, but often we kind of function from them not really noticing the difference. But like when I take the time to stop and think about, like, ooh, like I do this thing because I want to fix myself, or I'm like ashamed about this part of myself, instead of like that growth mindset of like, this is something that's really important to me. And this is something like I know I could develop as a skill or a mindset or whatever
Right.
that is. And it's, again, it's kind of like how we talk to ourselves, and maybe that's
Mhm.
part of it. Like maybe I've never really thought of, maybe a value that I have is like how I talk to others with love and respect, and working to speak to myself with that same love and respect, and
Yeah. Oh,
weaving that
I
value into my life too.
yeah. I love that so much. I nearly got chills from that because it does, like, it's so important how you talk to yourself and being consistent with what you're putting out there and what you're introducing and holding inside of yourself too. And there's so much that you were saying, like, I don't know, I was just like enraptured. I feel like I had something to say back to it, but I'm also just like, man, I could listen to you forever.
I think it's because
Oh,
it's something that's so important to us, like this idea
yeah,
of like really living authentic lives. I think maybe is a value for both of us.
right,
And
right.
I think it's a value for most people. We just may not know how to go about doing it, or like what are the practices to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point earlier about, what's my value or what values do I have and how do they differentiate from internalizing that I'm a broken, wounded person that constantly needs healing and fixing and growth and development? Because we are good and beautiful and complete the way we are in this moment. And yes, we can constantly grow and find new ways to learn and continue on our path forward throughout our journey of life. But I think that it's dangerous to assume that there's something wrong with you all the time. It's like not a healthy way to live your life, and to always go to self-help and self-development things as a crutch, thinking like I have to fix myself. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm always going to be broken. And these, really extremes, right? The always going to be broken, the never going to be perfect. Like that's the black and white thinking that really it does kind of trap a lot of people. And let's just say right off the bat, perfectionism, it is, first off, being perfect is not tangible, like that doesn't exist. And on top of it, there's this book, it's called something about perfectionism. I'll have to look it up. But basically it's a perfectionist's guide to letting go, something like that. Um, and it's interesting because the author talks about different perfectionistic styles, from the procrastinator to the type A planner and everything in between. And then she's ultimately coaching the reader, I would say, to at least, and I haven't finished the book, but coaching in the sense like she's mapping it out that, hey, if you can recognize that there's different styles of perfectionism that fall
Yeah.
under this umbrella that have typically in the past been ridiculed and held against you as something bad, you can actually turn it, reframe it, relearn it, right? And see it as a
Mm.
superpower of something that can actually help propel you into the future. And it's not something that you now need to be ashamed of or try to bury, try to fix, correct, whatever. You can actually use it, implement it, and integrate it into your life for your own benefit. I mean, like you said, this is for yourself at the end of the day. Um, the values that you have. I know I heard Patches meow, so he must agree.
He's like, yeah, live your values authentically.
Exactly. I know. And authenticity, like you said, I mean, it's something that a lot of people care about. I don't know if we all know what that looks like, from a
Yeah.
tangible perspective.
Yeah.
Um, but living in this moment, being present, I think that's why, you get lost in the moment because you are just feeling like this is all that matters.
Yeah, and I think that's something like it is again that balance of like planning, staying aligned to the values that you have and like what you want that stems from those values, like designing your life like that, and also like allowing a space for things to happen, like, and that flexibility. And I feel like sometimes, like you're talking about that black and white thinking, like I feel like sometimes it's really easy to go into like one or the other.
Hmm.
Okay, he's actually he's getting a little temperamental. He's like, "You're here and you aren't talking to me." Patch's values
That's okay.
are mom, pet me now.
Right, right. Feel free to bring them into the conversation. It's fine. The more, the merrier.
Come here, Bubba. Come here. I know. Oh, he's like,
I love
when I
the
come home from
Superman
work, he's
arm.
used to like cuddling on my lap, and we haven't cuddled
Yeah,
yet. And he's like,
yeah,
"Excuse me, I have a value,
yeah.
and that's
I matter
cuddling."
too, right? And like you were saying earlier, like your pets have values too, you know?
Yeah. And like that's a value to me, is that like having this little companion and like someone like that waits for me when I get home and that I take care of. And I don't know, it's a different way of like living those values. Something I want to go back to though that you said, um, kind of about perfectionism, but I think is like something I know not all of the people who will listen to this and view this will be women, but I will say, like, I feel like the cultural messaging tends to be you're either not enough or you're too much. And so, like, that perfectionist tendency to like stay in that road. And like, as women, we've just like internalized those messages over and over and over again. It's like this little pathway in our brains to like self censor. Um, and I think like when we can start to acknowledge when that self censoring is happening, like even just acknowledge it, like
Yeah.
welcome
Don't have
it.
to do anything about it. Like, hey, I see you. I
Yeah. And like,
recognize you.
yeah. And that like curiosity and kindness that I talked about, like, like we've received these messages. I think on a certain level, like, I think there's like a part of me that is like angry that this is like how we've kind of been like programmed in a way. And that's where it's like every act in which we acknowledge, like, I'm thinking this way, or I'm about to censor myself or my authentic self, like, every act of like acknowledging it and then at some point down the line, like, correcting it or replacing it with what we really want, like, that's really how we change, and how we change the culture, how we change
Right.
ourselves and the
Mhm.
lives in which we lead.
That's so true. Just acknowledging it, being mindful about it, and then adjusting for it positively, negatively. I mean, in the sense of, like you said, is it growing? Is it born, or is it dying and I can let go of it? So that's great. So something else that like has been just a recurring theme in my life. I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but I feel like, to your point about women and humans, we tend to be like difficult on ourselves and think that
Mm.
for something to count, for us to be validated in our accomplishments, it has to have been this difficult, grueling process to get there. And what I started to realize was, I have intuition for a reason. There's certain natural abilities, and skills that I have. And of course, these things can be honed over time, and you can develop your talents and grow them into even stronger strengths that you have. But why is it that in the past, I would have looked at like a grade in English? If I got an A in English, I would have just thought, oh, well, it was too easy. But a C in science, I would have felt like that was too hard, but I worked really hard to get my C. And somehow that meant more to me than my A in English. And I mean, this is maybe a goofy example, but I think so often in life, if something comes naturally to us, we dismiss it as being easy for everyone, and we don't realize that that's not everyone's forte, or their aptitude doesn't speak to that one area that's coming naturally to us, which could actually be an indicator of maybe our purpose or something that we're meant to do while we're living here, if we only leaned into it and followed it. And life is not always easy, of course. Even when you're in a state of flow, there's certain challenges, but you have that instinct within you, like, hey, this is my track and I'm going to explore it. Even
Yeah.
creating this Becoming You podcast, it's a perfect example. I'm like, let's go. I don't know where we're going, but we're going.
We're just doing it, you know.
Yeah, just doing it.
I think there's something too of a couple years ago, I was given a SMART goals worksheet, and
Mm.
I struggle with SMART goals in different ways. And
Don't
for
we
those of
all?
you who may
Yeah.
not know what SMART goals are, like they're just very specific, like measurable, like timely goals. But one of the things before you set the goals, this worksheet that was given to me, it asked to write out three strengths that you have and a goal for how you can continue to develop that strength. And then obviously three areas of growth and how you wanted to take steps to develop in that area as well too. And I think what struck me though about that is there are certain times I think growing up where like if something was easy for me or like I was at least like mediocre, I was like, okay, I'm good in that. Like let's move on to the stuff like I really got to work on. And
Right.
yet there was something in that goal setting sheet that like that aha moment of like, oh, like I can still invest in those areas. And again, it's switching from like what I'm good at and what comes naturally, like all those things, to like again, what really matters to me. Like because maybe there's an area of growth that I have, but that's actually a value to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's again that like instance where you're like, oh, like what really matters to me. Um, and it's kind of a funny thought because there's a lot of freedom in that. You know, whether you're good at something or not good, you know, again,
Right.
like
Right.
good and not, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like again, are
Absolutely.
those things that we think we're good at, are they just values of the society that we happen to be good at, you know?
Right. Right.
I don't know,
And do
there's a
we
lot
actually
of
care
questions
about
there.
them? Yeah. Because there's
Mhm.
also the other side of it. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean that that's your life purpose. You may not enjoy it, and people may just be pigeonholing you because they think, hey, you're good at this one thing. I want you to do this for me because it fits into my vision. And that's where we also have to be careful. Like, if you have a clear idea of what you want to be doing with your life, how you want to spend your time, who you want to be around, you should really follow that versus just letting someone use you as a pawn in their lives and in their story. Now, if you don't have a clear idea, then by all means, try a few things out. And if someone's willing to take you and pluck you around, go for it. I've done that. It's no big deal. But, once you have a better idea of how you want to spend your time, spending your time in those other ways is going to seem so arbitrary and just at the bottom of your priority list at that point, you know. um yeah, it's just wild how you kind of like evolve and decide for yourself, hey, I used to be good at this one thing, but that's not where I want to spend my time anymore. I want to go off and do this thing. And it's called midlife crises and it's called changing careers, but it
Mhm.
speaks to something deeper. It speaks to people actually getting in touch with themselves and being honest with themselves and any relevant parties around them to make their passion or their follow their intuition, make that a reality.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said too. And I know there's a piece here in like, for me, I've always been very like goal oriented. And if you've ever read The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, one of the habits is keeping the end in mind. Like, so it's very like, this is where we're going, this is where we're headed. Um,
Stay the
and
course,
I think,
don't
I
deviate.
think, I think for me, like a particular life lesson, especially over the last few years, has been like learning to enjoy the process. And for me, that has been uncomfortable because of this, like, well, I have to struggle to like get this thing or do this thing, or I have to like really hustle, and then you like miss everything between A and B, and it's like you're missing your own life. So actually at work, I have a post-it on my laptop that says enjoy it. And it's just like this intention that I've set for myself to remind myself to try to enjoy the process.
Yeah, yeah,
Even if it's something that I'm uncomfortable with, or receiving feedback, or something that's new and scary and I'm afraid of failing or looking like an idiot, or whatever it is, like to try to enjoy the process and believe that we deserve to enjoy the process.
yeah. That's awesome. So do you find that that mantra, having that nearby, is really helpful, pulls you out of any funk you might be having in the moment, or how do you see it kind of working for you?
That's a good point. Sometimes I feel like it comes up mostly like as I'm packing up at the end of the day. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't enjoy any of that.
Right.
Or like the last time I
Enjoy the
enjoyed
rest of that
anything, it was like
roll.
3 hours ago, and it was
Right.
like lunch, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Like it's kind of a point for like examination, like, um, yeah, to just become aware of like moments when I stopped keeping that in mind, and when I went back to the other path, of just like the grind and hustle and make it work, make it fit, all of
yeah.
that stuff.
Right. That like
um
forcing nature.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a lot of like, at least I think what we've been taught in this modern American consumeristic capitalistic culture is like consume and force and make it happen. Like that's the American dream, like make it
Yeah.
happen, you know
Right. Right. It's so true.
at what cost?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that just makes me think of like so many areas in life, and of course I can best speak to my own experience, but not to make this all about me. I'm sure it's applicable to a lot of people, but there's so often areas in our life that flow so smoothly and we attract, the right energy. We're our best selves in those areas of our lives. And then there's other sections that we may think need to look a certain way. And of course, those are the ones that can never get it together. It's like, why is my life so abundant over here? And this part that's supposed to be sorted out, it'll just never look the way it's supposed to. And how can I like force it to become what it's meant to be according to, society or family or just preconceived notions buried deep in your subconscious? Why can't it just work, right? And accepting the fact that maybe that's not how it's meant to look at the end of the day, and trying to replicate the areas that you do allow life to flow and where you are attracting abundance, and to just kind of shift that mindset into this area and breathe life into it and let it unfold in the way that it's meant to be. I mean, that's the most beautiful, most perfect, I know perfect doesn't exist, but I'm a recovering perfectionist. It's fine. But that's like the most perfect way that I would like my prescribed life, to unfold, is if I could just have flow in every aspect of life and just be okay with the areas that I keep trying to force and just let it
Mm,
go. I mean, it's obviously not happening for a reason, and to just accept
yeah.
that.
And I think something that came to my mind as you were sharing that is like there are certain words that I'm also really mindful of. Like if I say them out loud or somebody else is saying out loud or they're like cycloning in my head, like that I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, I need to think about this. And it's usually words like I have to, I'm supposed to, I should, and those are words where it's like, ooh, somebody else is like, there's something like value or something else that I've absorbed or
Hmm.
I'm like, really and truly, I don't have to do anything,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
exactly.
know? And
Yeah.
like, I'm 33, I'm supposed to have hit certain milestones in life. I'm like, according to who? And like, are
Right.
those milestones that I even want?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I don't know. It's those words, like being aware of the wording has really helped me like identify some of those like implicit values that I've absorbed.
Right. Right. And just identifying, wait, is this my voice or is it the other voice? Is it my intuition or is it the inner critic, trying to steamroll here? And I think just asking ourselves those questions, like you said, I mean, I know these things take time. Not everyone has time in their day or makes time in their day. But this is the inner dialogue in your head, which we all know our thoughts are going regardless. So we may as well give them a little coaching and like guide them into a different direction. Like, hey, if you're going to do so much chatter anyway, please make it constructive, please be productive in my brain up there, so that we can have a better day all together. We can enjoy what we're doing, even if it's not the most enjoyable task for whatever reason, or if we're in an environment that maybe it's harder to really be mindful and present. But I think that there's something good about that, and not simply detaching, disassociating, and thinking about the future or the past to ignore the present. I mean, pain is an indicator, it's there for a reason, and it helps you navigate what to move away from and towards in your life. And if you're ignoring the pain and numbing the pain, you're going to have a harder time actually healing that part of yourself and part of your life.
Mm, yeah. And I think there's something too to the idea of taking, I know it's kind of funny because this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. So there is like a time and place of like, okay, really meeting ourselves with curiosity and kindness, and like those words of like have to, should, supposed to. I had a counselor one time who encouraged me to take those to court, and he was like, if you were a lawyer and you like someone said like you have to, have a baby by the time you're 34, and it's like, take it to court. Like, how would you argue? What's the evidence? Like, who says, like, and like to think critically about some of those things that we believe, like take it to court. Like, is this something that holds up? Is there evidence? And it's
Yeah,
kind of a creative tactic,
it
but it
is.
is like, oh, it doesn't mean it's true. Like, you know,
Yeah, I love that. And it's
so
something that we can all role play in our heads, because we all have an idea of court, whether we have been to court, we work in a courtroom, or we've seen Suits on TV, like we all have an
yeah,
idea of court. And there's such excitement with getting things thrown out of court, right? Because, oh, they had no case, they
yeah.
couldn't prove it, like we're scot free. And so you can give yourself that same freedom, that same empowerment of, hey, I was told I had to do this, but prove it. Like you can't. So
Mhm.
I don't have to listen to you. La 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 la. Like na na na
There's
na
no
na.
law, there's no,
Yeah.
citation or,
Right.
bylaw. I'm like, okay, I'm free.
Right. Exactly. I love that. Oh. What a good visual. I mean, there's so many gems I'm going to be using in my life, just that you've shared today alone. So I love it. I'm glad that you were, on the show. What matters now, are the things that are bothering you, are they even your responsibility? Whose problem is it? Ask yourself that, and then let it go or deal with it in the future. Write it down, get it out of your head, and then just keep moving forward, be present, and take things one step at a time. With that in
Yeah.
mind,
Does
Anna,
this really
Banana,
matter?
right? Does it really matter? Yeah, you're like, does it really matter? Um, so when you think about becoming you, are there any other thoughts that come to mind, either your future self or what you're doing today to set yourself up for success, or any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think something that's coming to my mind right now is just this idea of like, I have a relatively good grasp on what some of my core values are, like the core of who I am. And there are some really great values exercises that you can find online. And I will say, like, there is one value that kind of, if I had to pick one value for my life, like, it would be love. And I can actually compare my other values to love. Like, does it serve love? Like, does it fit in that love? Like, and every time I leave an interaction with someone, like, was it from a place of love? Or, and it's just something that's become so important to me. And like, when you have that, like, yes, I'm going to make mistakes. And yes, I'm going to say things that probably aren't very loving. And it also helps me, like, again, kind of take to court some of those thoughts and ideas, especially about how I think and talk to myself. Like, is this the same way that I would think and talk to Katrina, or to someone else that I really care about? Like, is this the same thing? And like, really identifying those areas where I'm like, ooh, this doesn't fit, or ooh, like something's not right here. And like, we know when that happens. Um, and also, again, like allowing the journey to unfold, striving to enjoy the journey as best we can. Because I'd hate to get to like 80 and be like, I'm not sure I enjoyed any of that, but I have like a
Right.
product that I'm pleased with,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
I don't know. There's just something to that it's just a balance of a lot of pieces, and to take the time to like calibrate ourselves. Like, that's something I try to do once a month, is like look at my values and like really where I am, and like in relation to those values, and where things need to be brought into alignment, or something I need
Mhm.
to let die, or something that needs
Right.
room and space to be born.
Yeah.
Or like taking an opportunity with a friend to celebrate how much progress we have made in identifying our values and aligning and designing a life with those values in mind.
Yeah. I love that. Man, what a mic drop. But you're right. You're right. I think, yeah, taking the time to do this. Oh, and I wanted to shout out our tea party that we're having here, a little soiree. Got dressed up, had some hot tea, having a chat over tea, just two ladies having tea.
Yeah. It's moments like this, though, that you're like, wow, I don't know, when we give ourselves that time and space, and it always helps to have a friend who's on that same path or has similar values. And then it's great to have friends that have different values,
Right,
or
right.
live differently. And I don't know, just to celebrate all of the in between, that nothing is good and nothing is
Yeah,
bad. It's just like,
yeah.
these are the values.
Right, right. And this is just the existence. This is the time on earth. This is where I am. I have hardly any control over a lot of things, but I can control myself and my outlook. And to just be grateful for that and celebrate along the way. I mean, I love celebrating along the way. I think there's so many things that happen day to day. I so it's very common for content creators to like repeat their content and regurgitate the same message over and over. And my thought has always been, my life is so rich, so robust, so full. I could talk about anything from every single day of my life and never have to repeat myself, because there's always just something new and amazing going on. And I also I also take time to design my life in that way because I want it to be so rich and full of memories, experiences, and milestones, with my friends, solo. It's not that it doesn't matter, but it shows up in a lot of different ways, to your point. You don't always have to have the same type of friend in every category or the same structure around this is the only way I can have fun. Like, maybe broaden your horizons then. If you're finding that you can only have fun in one area or in one specific, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know, routine or something. But yeah, I think just being open to life and open to your life and creating it, it's the best way to become the best version of yourself or who you're meant to be, whatever that looks like for you. So thanks for
Yeah,
being here, Anna.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing all your
Oh,
thoughts. You're an
yeah, thank you
amazing
for
woman.
having me. Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you
And
so
yes,
much.
Patches, thank you for being here too. I love how he pops his head around right for that.
He's like, and goodbye.
Yes, exactly. You are my most important listener, and I can't thank you enough for spending your time with me. If this content resonates with you, then hit subscribe. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube by following @ConnectorQueen. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Becoming You.